Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Accelerate RegTech 2022, the Global Growth Corridor. This is the 5th annual Accelerate event for the RegTech Association, and over the next 3 days, we'll bring together global speakers virtually to examine impacts and opportunities for RegTech over 3 interconnected streams. First, a macro perspective. We'll look at culture, collaboration, and trade. Tomorrow, we'll drill down into institutional and regulatory reform. And finally, on Thursday, we'll have the annual Pitch Fest and an exploration of new areas for RegTech application. Each day is going to begin with a series of rapid-fire presentations of 8 minutes each, and then we'll follow those with a Changemaker roundtable discussing a range of issues and challenges and opportunities. It is worth noting that of our 36 speakers over the next few days, that's 36, which gives you some idea of why our presentations are just 8 minutes. But of those 36, 70% are women, which the RegTech Association has worked really hard to achieve. But the association has been helped by the fact that Australia's Chief Scientist, Chief Trade Negotiator, Minister for Financial Services and Asset Commissioner are all women, which is quite a turnaround compared to not so long ago. A thank you to our sponsors, especially Microsoft, Austrade, KPMG, CBA, Investment New South Wales, Deco Secure, Gung Ho Marketing, and Dubber, and the many RegTechs and supporting organisations. If I refer you to the housekeeping slide, and there's lots of other information as well on the platform, which will tell you how to get the most out of the next 3 days. I would like to start proceedings by paying our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, wherever you may be tuning in from, and we acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and their continued connection to the land, sea and sky. Let's get straight to our presentations this morning under the broad theme of the big picture. The pandemic has seen digital transformation happen at lightning speed, with huge volumes of data flowing through the system, highlighting an even greater need for financial inclusion and trust, and for policymakers and businesses and regulators to work together. At the same time, cross-border trade has become even more critical to scaling businesses globally. Against that backdrop, our speakers will bring their perspectives on the issues and the opportunities to be leveraged by those in the RegTech ecosystem. They'll each give a short presentation and leave you with a provocation, some valuable food for thought. I'll keep their introductions brief because all the biographical information is on the platform. Also, just a note, there's no Q&A in this section in the interest of time, but save your questions and do share your insights over the platform. You can share your insights via the chat, and there's also a Q&A function, and we'll get to questions a little later in the session. So to our first speaker this morning, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Mackinlay, Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner and Head of UK, Europe and Israel. Jennifer leads a team of 70 staff across 11 posts to deliver high quality trade and investment services to Australian and European clients. Over to you, Jennifer.
Good morning. Thank you, Ali. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. It is just an absolute honour to welcome you all to day 1 of the RegTech Association's Accelerate RegTech event this year, 2022. Today, as Ali said, we'll be discussing the big picture, the strategic, cultural, trade and economic trends that are shaping our world. I'm Australia's General Manager with Austrade based in Paris, and through my work in the region, it has been none more so evident that the world is undergoing momentous change. We're seeing new norms and behaviours, and these are being generated, and technology has provoked new business models, new organisational structures, and in turn, this creates new challenges. We're also seeing a period of deglobalisation, which is underway with war, political tension, and a reconfiguration of supply chains. At the same time, global issues such as the pandemic that we've endured for the last 2.5 years, data, tax and climate require pressing solutions. So in this context, it is really appropriate and timely that the RegTech Association has brought us together to discuss how we as people and organisations can influence how technology, culture and society will meet these challenges directly and intelligently. Firstly, I'd like to say that international events such as this one are really key to maintaining and growing the already strong flows between Australia and Europe. At Austrade, we have seen the strong flows in RegTech between Europe and Australia. RegTech Association stakeholders see Europe as a preferred market, and Australian capability in RegTech is very well regarded in Europe. And this is pretty unsurprising given that Australia ranks third globally in RegTech behind the US and UK. We're also seeing an increasing number of international RegTechs looking to Australia as a priority market, as well as interest from investment firms. This has been well supported by linkages between the RegTech Association and counterparts in Europe, as well as government-led initiatives such as the Australia-UK FinTech Bridge and the Australian government RegTech pilots across a number of domains. And this is really where free trade comes in and is very, very important. The recently concluded Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement will benefit the growth of the RegTech sector in due course and will support existing collaboration between UK and Australia regulators. Elisabeth, the Chief Negotiator of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, will tell us more about the benefits and opportunities of this historic FTA. RegTech's application is indeed wide. The current war in Ukraine has shocked and saddened all of us. However, it is in this context that RegTech has assisted corporates and financial institutions to quickly respond to sanctions and other measures. The recently announced EU Digital Markets Act will reshape the relationship between governments, technology platforms and consumers, and we expect RegTech to play its part in this. We have ever larger data sets to manage and secure, but we must meet our obligations to governments, people and society all the same. ESG and the path to net zero are becoming a priority across the globe. Policymakers and executives are increasingly focused on proper visibility of emissions and climate-related risk, ESG credentials and exposure to ESG-related risks. Once again, RegTech will play a critical role in helping firms monitor and implement obligations under ESG-related regulation. So to conclude, RegTech really sits at the intersection of all of the forces shaping our world, helping us understand, navigate and meet the challenges ahead. It's an absolute privilege for myself to hear from the fabulous collection of thinkers and experts who will participate in the program of Accelerate RegTech 22 this year. As Ali said, day one will focus on the big picture issues of trade, the economy, culture and collaboration between industry, government and regulators. Day two will look more into institutional and regulatory reform. And day three, I must say, I'm looking very much forward to the annual Pitch Fest, where the RegTech will be crowned for the Accelerate R of the year for best pitch and best alignment to ESG. And then on to the new economy, where we take the learnings from financial services and look how this can be applied across other industry verticals. Austrade is absolutely delighted to sponsor and participate in this event this year. I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the program and I hope you enjoy the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer Mackinlay. Well, next we're joined by Dr. Cathy Foley, who became Australia's 9th Chief Scientist in January 2021 after an extensive career at Australia's National Science Agency, the CSIRO. Dr. Foley is an internationally recognised physicist and her scientific excellence and influential leadership have been recognised with numerous awards and fellowships. Here's Dr. Cathy Foley.
I got to aim it up high, yeah. So put me on the phone to God. There's a mountain I should climb, and I'm here to take what is mine.
Hi everyone, thanks to RegTech Association for this opportunity to share some of my thinking about technology, trust and embracing our full human potential for science and innovation. There's little doubt that the pandemic has been a catalyst for scientists and researchers to find new ways of working. So I want to go back to thinking about how we operate in the past. So consider, for example, A researcher generally works in a lab. They use their own specialized equipment to conduct experiments. They collected and analyzed their own data, and eventually they write up a paper of their and publish their research. The rapid shift towards working remotely, though, has created new options for scientific exploration, with scientists now able to collaborate more, be more mobile, and accessing the capabilities of others. And from home, a scientist can send a request to a lab to conduct an experiment, and that lab provides the data back to the researcher, saving time, resources, and money. How and where we do research has changed. And once we have an outcome, there's a rule of thumb that it takes about 20 years from science breakthrough to seeing a product or an impact. But the pandemic has shown that this time can be shortened. The Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, he dubbed it the pace of changes, calling it the quickening, where we saw 2 years of digital transformation in just 2 months. And there is no doubt the rate of technology change is galloping along even faster now. It's our knowledge-based industries that have been identified as the driver of the Australian economy. And that's including things like low emissions technology, pharmaceuticals, artificial intelligence, and automation. Now, the government is very committed to being in the top 10 digital economies of the world by 2030. And that date's not far away. And digital and emerging technologies like quantum and artificial intelligence will become an increasingly important driver for success for all Australian businesses and sectors. But alongside the opportunities, there are uncertainties and risk. Technology development and digital advancement involves many industries, sectors, technologies, and applications. And it includes materials and products and supply chains. And this makes uptake even more complex. So gaining social license is absolutely critical. This is done through, I think, effective communication. We also need to make sure that the new technologies do not have unintended consequences. A really nice example of gaining social license can be seen in the development and acceptance of Australian sunscreens. An Australian research group actually achieved their goal of acceptance of nanotech by seeking its regulation that support it when it's safe to use, but restricting its use when it's unsafe. And this is an excellent example of where researchers took into account the importance of having the social license from day one. So this is how you build public trust. And then there's social media. That's an experience we all know about. And from the social license and regulatory perspective, it actually caught us by surprise. It's clear we didn't get the checks and balances right in the first place. And we're seeing the result of online bullying, issues with election integrity, and problems with ownership of data and privacy. All around us, there's an amplification of disinformation and conspiracy. And once we might have been able to shake our heads and ignore a crazy idea, those crazy ideas now move and grow more quickly than our power to combat them. So social media and the current generation of mobile applications has given us a taste of the dangers. The artificial intelligence system is creating its own models for harvesting information, which makes it all the more difficult to control. We need to explore the possibilities for auditing algorithms and public disclosure of their assumptions. Now, please don't get me wrong, I am a champion for technology development. I've been working on critical technologies for 40 years plus. But my point is more that we need to make sure we have the social and ethical frameworks right to ensure we have transparency and accountability. Public trust is critical to enable acceptance and uptake of technology. Engagement, consultation, and ongoing communication with the public is essential for community confidence. Research and its translation requires a whole of ecosystem approach, true co-design and development between both federal and state governments, industry, and researchers. Success will not be defined by the actions of just one institution, but by the collective efforts and collaboration of a strong network. This is where the potential to make improvements is open to us. And this event and the incredible program of speakers is a testament to the ambition of a coordinated and joined up approach of all of you engaged here today. I really would like to recognise the Tech Council of Australia and RegTech Association in particular. So there's 3 key things we need to get right. The first is keeping the support of fundamental research. Human curiosity has brought us a long way so far, and it will continue to lead the way to new discoveries. The second is we need to get the social license right. Community acceptance and industry uptake is fundamental. And finally, getting the regulatory settings right to balance the risk and the opportunity with the right level of flexibility. That's absolutely paramount. Now, this is my go-to explanation in the past of how the sector should work together, but it's not quite as linear as this diagram suggests. But the premise remains, how do we fill in the gaps and encourage collaboration? Along with areas of expertise pulling together, we're also seeing a concerted and coordinated effort to bring the full spectrum of stakeholders from research, industry, governments and startups together. And we're seeing the value of taking a holistic approach where we can pull together the engineers, the experts in business, marketing and communication experts, ethicists, some people with the capacity to think in nuanced ways about safety and community acceptance. And this is about different disciplines, but it's also about different ways of thinking. Ensuring we consider a range of perspectives is about tapping into our human potential. Recognizing and embracing difference is how we add depth and richness to our decision-making. Diversity is more than being fair and inclusive. It is essential if we're going to achieve our goals. We simply have to have diversity in inputs, not only to ensure we have the response right, but to ensure our workforce has the right skills. We won't get the workforce skills we need without thinking more broadly. And that includes thinking about ways to attract women into science and tech fields. This graph shows data from the latest STEM Equity Monitor, and you'll see that only a tiny proportion, only 9% of women enrolled in tertiary education are studying STEM qualifications. And this is in areas related to maths, sciences and engineering, but it is excluding health. And for men, the figure is 35%. So put another way, more than 90% of women at university or TAFE are studying for qualifications not related to STEM. So when your country is building its future on high-tech STEM-related industries, that's a problem. Now, I'm very aware that I'm a role model, whether I like it or not. And just like all of the workplace leaders in the audience, our responsibility is to influence for change. We must stand confidently and lead by example to inspire and advance the careers of those who come after us. So Australia has the scientific foundations and the innovative capacity, but from here on, we need a collaborative approach, and we're cultivating this as we speak. Science is more than eureka moments. We have breakthroughs when we create new knowledge and new ways of thinking about complex problems. And when we use all our human potential in everything we do, recognizing and embracing difference is how we add depth and richness to our decision-making and problem solving. So I ask you as leaders to think about how will you broaden your approach to unlock the full human potential in your sectors. As we navigate the new normal of our working environment, what are you going to do that's different? And how will you shape this for the better? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Cathy. And there you have it, our first provocation for the morning. Well, next we turn to Samantha Turner. Samantha is a sales excellence lead for Microsoft's GPS ANZ business. Her previous roles include working as program director for the Champions of Change Global Tech and Microsoft Partners Groups, and as a consultant with Elisabeth, Broderick & Co. and the Human Rights Commission on their highly reputable reviews of workplace culture. Here's Samantha Turner.
Good morning, everyone. As is customary in Australia, I'd like to acknowledge today that I'm on Indigenous land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any First Nations people that we might have across the globe with us today. Also, Cathy, what an absolute delight it is to follow you. Thank you for being such a role model for all genders, but especially for young women and girls in STEM, and for the amazing work that you do with Champions of Change, obviously really close to my heart. So today I've been asked to speak about culture, not tech, but I'm actually going to twist it slightly to be culture with tech, because really tech is everywhere, and tech can be a tool for inclusion, and it can also be a tool for exclusion. So today I'll just provide a really quick overview of the Australian and global landscape around diversity and inclusion and tech, and really delve into organisational culture and what it means for inclusion. And so I'll just jump straight in. Why is an inclusive culture important? And I'm sure that you all know, but I think it's really important to cover, because we can all get better at being more inclusive humans. With every interaction, every day, every workplace and every environment, we can all be more inclusive. I'm sure we all know the business case for diversity around talent. And when we talk about culture in a broad sense, it often becomes a bit of a nebulous concept. It's organisational culture over there. But actually what culture is a system of individuals. It's individuals who have the power to be inclusive or exclusive, and it's individuals who shape the culture of our organisations. And really organisation, along with senior leadership, sets the tone. It sets the tone for inclusion, around compliance, around risk, around behaviour and around reputation. And it really sets the temperature for everything that an organisation does and provides an informal control mechanism. The current climate for inclusion in Australia, we lead the way absolutely in terms of policy development, in terms of legislation, particularly around things like domestic and family violence leave, around leave for caring. But really we have quite a long way to go in terms of creating inclusive cultures where everyone feels included, everyone feels safe and everyone belongs. And really the testament to that is the culture that we have at the moment societally around large-scale reviews into our organisations, focused on harassment, focused on bullying, and we've seen significant interest in that space regardless of industry. And it just means that whatever we've done in the past, no matter how well-intentioned, it's really not worked. But it's also evidence that we want to find a better way. And so what is harassment? It's really any behaviour where the recipient feels excluded. It's unwanted, it's unwelcome, it can be face-to-face, and we know increasingly it can be online. Harassment by definition is an act of exclusion rather than inclusion. And it's why a culture of inclusion is just so important, because if you have an inclusive culture, it literally cannot be a culture of harassment and bullying. And as humans, we know each other's intent. So we know if people mean to include us or exclude us. And according to stats from the Australian Human Rights Commission, 72% of Australians have experienced sexual harassment in their lifetime. That's 3 out of every 4 people, regardless of gender. And we know that that's increased in the workplace environment. So at the moment, it's 1 in 4 people have experienced harassment at work. We know that has increased with the advent of hybrid work and people going online. And when you give it an intersectional lens, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and people with a disability, it's 1 in 2. So if you think that this behaviour is not happening on your watch or in your organisation, especially if you're not hearing about it, that's a red flag, because it means that people don't trust reporting mechanisms and they don't feel safe to speak up. And we know in the regulated environments that we work in that presents risk. Microsoft has a long-standing commitment to inclusion and also social inclusion through tech, not just because it's a commercial imperative, but because it impacts every part of our organisation and our licence to operate. Our customers expect it. They expect us to be representative of the communities in which we serve. Our employees expect it, particularly employees these days being vocal and more demanding of change. And as Cathy pointed out, they now have vehicles which are very accessible in terms of, one bad review can really impact an organisation's reputation quite substantially. We have increased responsibility for community, and we have increased responsibility to our shareholders, especially when it comes to ESG legislation. My one critical observation over the years working in this space and working on reviews, especially in male-dominated areas such as tech and banking and credit risk, is that the tone of inclusion is absolutely set from the top. So what do? As I said before at the very beginning, inclusion is the responsibility of every individual. And so we can all be better allies. We can all be better upstanders. And so what is an upstander? It's an opportunity either in the moment or out of the moment to support someone who may have been the recipient of harassment, but it's also about role modeling inclusion. How do you educate yourself on diversity? And as Cathy pointed out, we really want our organisations to be filled with people with diversity of experience. We know that it fuels innovation, but that those diverse voices need not only a seat at the table, but they need to have a space where they're safe to speak. And this is where in organisations, your inclusion, your culture is only as good as your least inclusive human. It's only as good as your squeaky wheel. And I see this a lot in organisations. We excuse behaviour, particularly when it's around tenure. So we say, oh, that's just that person, that's just what they're like, don't worry about them. Whereas actually we need to be upstanding and we need to really help that person or for that group of people really get on the inclusion journey. And you don't need a full-scale review in order to address this. The most important step is to show demonstrated leadership and to implement actions. Because anything that doesn't feel safe to openly discuss, whether it's work-related or not, I'm going to try and hide that or cover it. And we know that when people cover, and we know that 2/3 of the dominant majority, so 2/3 of white men, actually cover something about themselves in a workplace, that takes away from productivity, takes away from innovation, and it takes away from curiosity. And so we really need to be focusing on environments where people really can not just survive and not just fit in, but they belong. And what's the difference between fitting in and belonging? I like to think about a jigsaw. If I'm fitting in, I'm shaving a little piece off my puzzle to fit into the bigger picture. I've got to change something about myself. I've got to take off one of my pieces, or I have to change my colour. Whereas actually, if I belong, I'm going to find the spot in the jigsaw that fits me, fits my piece. And this is not about being the fun police or political correctness gone mad. Most of us work in highly regulated environments. But really, it's about, everyday inclusion. So, I believe that this is a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong journey of curiosity. And it's really the most valuable skill as a leader, but also as a human that you can cultivate and grow. So opportunities to be upstanders, increasing representation is one thing. And that's not just about gender, it's about diversity of background. We have very few excuses now with the advent of hybrid work about opening up our workplaces to regional and remote areas, to diversity of experience, but having a look inside as well. Who are you promoting? Who are you hiring? What are the skills that you need? Are they 20 years of experience, or is it actually that I need X, Y, and Z skill? And then from an individual perspective, how are you diversifying your thought and your space? Who do you mentor and sponsor that's not like you? Who do you promote that's not like you? And really, I'll leave you with, given that we can all be more inclusive every day, what is one inclusive action? What is one area that you're going to focus on for the next week, the next month, the next year, that's going to make you a more aware and a more inclusive human?
Sam, thank you very much. Sam Turner there. And that whole issue of inclusion is one that we're going to discuss further in the Changemaker Roundtable this morning. Well, next in our series of presentations, we're going to hear from Jane Madden, who co-established the strategic consulting firm Brickfielder Government Engagement in 2017 and is currently principal at Brickfielder Insights. She's previously held several roles in the Australian government, including Head of Tourism in the Department of Resources, Energy and Tourism, and General Manager and Head of Investment for Austrade. Here's Jane Madden.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jane Madden, and it's really great to be with you. I too would like to acknowledge that I'm standing on Indigenous land. I'm joining you from the beautiful Ngunnawal country in Canberra, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Today, in this globalised and increasingly digitised world in which we live, decision-making, risk management and compliance have become so complex for small organisations, for individuals, as well as large entities. Throughout my career, working in government, private sector and not-for-profits, both at executive and board roles, I've really seen this tide of huge change sweeping across multiple sectors and multiple economies. RegTech, any technology that enables organisations to comply with their regulatory requirements, can really touch them all. For my own part, I consider the potential of RegTech enormous and consequently am an early stage investor, advisor to a number of RegTech startups. With the use of examples, today I'd like to briefly examine how RegTech is a force for change, both positive and potentially less so, and how leaders and policymakers need to think about how we can optimise its potential. As we all know, the increasingly complex regulatory environment I've just mentioned has led to an increase in our compliance costs. Regulators here and elsewhere have issued heavy fines for non-compliance. The latest estimates suggest that it's almost $500 million Australian dollars in fines since the global financial crisis. So in this context, it's really natural that organisations everywhere are looking for solutions that help them reduce the risk of non-compliance. While financial services is the biggest spender on compliance as a sector, RegTech firms are seeing interest from right across other sectors, including government, energy, telco, healthcare. The sector agnostic nature of RegTech has been reinforced by its track record in financial services. Today, I was going to share with you the taxonomy of RegTech, but I understand most members of the RegTech Association know that taxonomy well, which covers the broad range of functions where RegTech can be applied. Everything from data privacy, data management, AI, risk control, and records management. Sometimes it really does feel that the technology and systems we introduce to make business and our lives easier and more efficient can work in the opposite direction. So this is where RegTech can really help. However, it needs to have, as Cathy and others have highlighted, good consultation, collaboration, and a customer focus to make it really work. Sharing information is not easy for a whole range of reasons. With information security, which is another big focus of RegTech, attacks on cybersecurity often go unaddressed because the organisation does not want to share the information, may be embarrassed or nervous about eroding its competitive position. Last year in Australia alone, there were 65,000 attacks and over $33 billion worth of lost revenue. Dispelling this shame or concern is a core part of addressing cyber attacks, and the government has sought to promote this in its critical infrastructure strategy, as I know from my early involvement in that Deputy Secretary steering group. This month, the National Security Council of the White House, Anne Neuberger, said all democratic countries are grappling with the visibility into critical infrastructure vulnerabilities that are almost entirely owned and operated by the private sector. So my key message here is that we need to work collaboratively across government and business if we are to address the major 21st century challenges like cybercrime, the design of fit-for-purpose regulatory mechanisms, and customer-centric service delivery. However, as I know from my many years there, government is on a journey and still grappling with client or citizen centricity. While not there yet, in many Australian governments, there is the recognition of the need to be more open, with greater listening to the public. Government and public service don't have all the answers, and so we have to be willing to listen, change and adapt. There will inevitably be frustrations on both sides. So RegTech here is vital as a transformative catalyst in terms of using technology in government. It can enable dealing with government to become more consistent over time, more efficient and more cost-effective in delivering services that meet the needs and expectations of citizens. In turn, government services focused around a citizen and their life, and not expecting a citizen to navigate government and its structures and departments, is turning governments in Australia from an inside out to a more outside in approach. As a result, some of the silos or separation between different government departments are breaking down. The government is looking to invest in scalable, repeatable and reusable digital platforms that allow speed, flexibility and innovation at scale. This means that public service departments often need to work together, hooray, and even join up for its digital service delivery. To give one example, the Tax Office is working alongside the industry portfolio and Treasury and Finance on job support digital platforms. Scalable, reusable, repeatable. This is at the heart of government's thinking. Business, including RegTech firms, often provide the tools and technology, the means to achieve the goals. RegTech can assist modern regulators of increasingly digital economies to be able to adapt to and preempt key developments within their mandates. Such platforms save implementation time and enable cost efficiencies. They accelerate business process alignment and simplification. And importantly for us in the public, with a tell us once approach, they can enable consistent ways of dealing with the government and remove some of the bureaucracy and uncertainty. Now, as well as poor collaboration, a lack of understanding, education and literacy can hold back the potential of RegTech. Regulatory bodies need to actively communicate with industry on their regulatory requirements, regulatory jurisdictions and specific points of contact. At the same time, regulators here and elsewhere should continue to develop their technical capabilities to take full advantage of technologies. This is a real challenge here in Australia, and for many developing countries in our region, it is a really big ask, which could further stymie economic development. For many of you, I commend reading the APEC report, Increasing APEC's FinTech and RegTech Capabilities, published last year. I too am also wary of RegTech as a protectionist tool. Digital infrastructure has been well proven to go across borders. For example, API Exchange is a global open architecture platform that supports innovation and inclusion. Similarly, cross-border regulatory testing raises opportunities for global collaboration that encourage the trade of services and technologies, development of standards, and improvement of financial inclusion. However, instead of opening up business opportunities, it can limit or close them off. Mutual recognition of regulatory requirements across economies enabled by RegTech may sound attractive, but what if it entrenches overly burdensome compliance or erodes competition and innovation? This issue has some way still to go to play out in international trade negotiations. RegTech community of interest groups for regulators and policymakers to share information and learn from each other can be really useful. There needs to be scrutiny regarding the purpose and impact of regulations that are being transformed through tech. On balance, RegTech is a real force for change. It can be positive, but how that change occurs depends on factors beyond the tech industry, including policy settings, and as we've heard from others today, culture. It needs to be informed by ethics, responsibility, economic development principles, and sustainability. So that is my provocation to you all today. How do we work to optimize the conditions for the development of RegTech? For me, multiple dimensions will be required for RegTech to reach its potential in breaking down, not building barriers, and improving business opportunities for all. Thank you very much.
Jane Madden, thank you. Plenty of opportunities and also challenges there, which we can pick up in the roundtable. Well, next we have Elisabeth Bowes, who was appointed Chief Negotiator, Regional Trade Agreements Division of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in January 2020, and then First Assistant Secretary in May 2020. Prior to that appointment, Elisabeth was Assistant Secretary, Trade and Investment Law Branch in the Office of Trade Negotiations in DFAT, and also Minister Counsellor at the Australian Embassy in Washington. Here's Elisabeth Bowes.
once, deception was fun. I keep a secret, a great adventure. The kind of regret could it have been future? Not going ahead.
Thank you very much, Ali, for that very kind introduction. And I'm particularly pleased to be following my very dear colleague, Jane Madden. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am sitting today, also the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And Jane gave a very nice lead in to what I wanted to address today, which is the intersection of RegTech and Australia's digital trade settings, particularly in our free trade agreements, as well as in our digital agreements. There are indeed trade opportunities that are presented by digital technologies, and these opportunities are growing rapidly. Indeed, as Samantha said, tech is everywhere, and consequently, government has to think how we can address tech in our free trade agreements. This is a trend that has only increased through COVID-19, as we are all aware. In fact, the World Economic Forum estimates that 70% of new value created in the global economy over the next decade will be based on digitally enabled platform business models. So it is with this reality in mind that Australia has worked to include some form of e-commerce or digital trade rules in almost all of our modern free trade agreements and our digital economy agreement with Singapore. These rules provide certainty, stability, and build trust in the online environment, enabling innovation and growth. The rules also promote compatible systems for businesses operating across borders to facilitate trade and to avoid protectionism. Protectionism indeed is an issue that Jane highlighted in her intervention just a few moments ago. So the question then becomes, what do these rules and agreements mean for RegTech providers? And what opportunities do these rules and provisions offer? In our view, digital trade rules can help ensure digital technologies fulfill their potential. These rules can broaden trade opportunities and help narrow the digital divide by lowering barriers to trade, improving trade efficiencies, facilitating access to markets, and creating new trade possibilities. Ultimately, modern digital trade rules actively shape an enabling environment for providers of goods and services to operate and compete in overseas markets. But what do these rules comprise? These rules typically include liberalising provisions such as requiring non-discriminatory treatment of foreign services suppliers and investors in the sector, limiting requirements for senior management and boards of directors to be of a particular nationality or resident in a host country, and obligations that a country not require access to or transfer of source code of software as a precondition to import, distribution, sale, or use of that software in the local market. Digital trade rules have proven to be of particular importance in the financial services sector, but they go beyond that sector. Indeed, Australia promotes strong digital trade rules as a means of pushing back on digital protectionism. Digital protectionism is best understood as barriers to digital trade, including censorship, filtering, data localization measures, and unduly burdensome privacy and security regulations, including requirements for approval or certification to transfer data. These barriers can threaten RegTech as well as FinTech by impairing access to data and ultimately frustrate a provider's ability to access and service foreign markets. And indeed, It is the opening up of foreign markets that is one of the main aims of our government's free trade agenda. Accordingly, Australia seeks several commitments in our trade agreements to facilitate trade by electronic means underpinned by the free flow of data and to break down barriers to trade such as data localization. Negotiators work to agree rules obligating countries to permit businesses to transfer data across borders and to prohibit countries from requiring businesses to locate computing facilities in a particular territory. In practical terms, this means that Australian RegTech providers have more certainty and regulatory clarity that they can transfer data to and from their Australian and international offices and processing centres. And that means that a RegTech provider can have certainty that your data is going to get where you need it to go and that your services can be delivered without obstruction to markets to which we have negotiated or established access. In our recent trade agreements, we have added to our traditional trade rules a range of cooperation and facilitation commitments, which we hope will support innovative businesses like RegTech providers. As an example, Australia's digital economy agreement with Singapore, in our view, the gold standard for a digital economy agreement, includes a rule encouraging collaboration on fintech and RegTech through respective policy and trade promotion agencies and regulators. This will promote closer and stronger collaboration between fintech and RegTech enterprises and industry bodies. Ultimately, trading rules and provisions on collaboration assist providers to explore new business opportunities by encouraging access to foreign markets through streamlined licensing, access to regulatory sandboxes, and collaboration on development of standards, such as for open banking. These approaches are, in our view, the future of digital trade, and we endeavour to include similar provisions in our FTAs and digital agreements. Our efforts to shape an enabling environment for RegTech also extend to our engagement with international organisations through fora such as the G20, OECD and APEC. For example, the 2020 APEC Financial Services Proposal, a joint project between the RegTech Association and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, provides a useful snapshot of the opportunities and barriers to trade for RegTech providers. The project included a focused dialogue within the highly diverse set of APEC economies that investigated the impact of COVID on the RegTech sector, but also revealed numerous high-quality programs around the world, planned and implemented by government agencies, industries, and international organisations that provide best practice examples of what can be achieved. We are continuing to consider, integrate, and advocate for the recommendations of that project and highlight the significant impact of international engagement on RegTech issues, and in particular, how our digital trade settings can help advance these new industries. In summary, Australia's priority is to advocate strongly for a rules-based and open global trading environment. Our vision for this environment is one that supports economic digitalisation, reduces barriers to trade, and builds trust and confidence in the online environment. We focus these efforts both at home and abroad with governments and international organisations. But as the rate of technological change continues to increase and the international environment continues to remind us of how dynamic it can be, we are conscious that there is always more work to be done. So it is on that note that I leave you with one final question to consider. The lack of international standards harmonisation is often cited as a significant obstacle to fintech, RegTech industry growth. So what are the priority international standards that we as government should be promoting to maximise opportunities for RegTech? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth. And that is indeed an enormous question, and it's one that we will discuss in the next hour. Last, but certainly not least in our series of rapid fire presentations this morning is Tony Nolson, who started her career as a software developer and has worked around the world for the likes of Salesforce, Amazon, and Microsoft. Tony's passionate about removing barriers for women, and her current role is Commercial Director at Frankie One. Tony Nolson, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ali. I'll just check that you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I come to you today from Gadigal land. As you can see, I'm at home. And so I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I really want to thank you for the opportunity. What a privilege to be here in this lineup of incredible women. So I've really enjoyed this morning, and I'm really excited for the rest of the conference. It's a great agenda. My name is Tony. I'm the Commercial Director at Frankie One. My background is in software, and I am really passionate about women in technology. And I'm also really passionate about building high performance, high inclusion cultures. And we have been asked to be here today because we were the humble recipients of the Export of the Year Award from Austrade. And so as the agenda suggests, I want to share a little bit about our RegTech success story, which we hope we are only just beginning. For anyone who doesn't know about us, Frankie One is probably best described as a data aggregator that specialise in identity and fraud. There's literally hundreds of great providers and great innovation in the KYC, KYB, IDV, AML and fraud space. So Frankie does three things. We bring it all together. We have a smart orchestration layer that gives you extreme customization and personalization for your customers, and we give you a single view of the customer. But specifically, when I think about Frankie and the mission and vision that we have, we're really an accelerant to innovation. And interestingly, that's what this conference is all about. We lower the barrier for entry for businesses innovating in the financial products and services space. And we do the undifferentiated heavy lifting in this space so that businesses can do what they do best, which is serving their customers and really transforming the market. Dr. Cathy Foley referred to this as the quickening, and I think that that's really relevant and definitely happening. And I would agree that innovation, I think I've lost my share screen, so I'll just try again. There's a huge amount of innovation in this space, particularly technical innovation. There we go. Around machine learning and quantum computing, but also blockchain and that space of Web3 and identity is growing so quickly. We're really excited about that. We think that this is an inflection point and a paradigm shift that we haven't really seen before, that we haven't seen before. Okay, well, I'll just continue. I don't actually know why that is, but you can still hear me. So I think that there's an inflection point in digital assets that is a really global trend. It will be as big as cloud computing was. It will be as big before as the internet was for e-commerce. And we're really excited that we're going to get to play a role in that. And so who are our customers? We're really fortunate to have a broad range of customers. We've got over 130 financial institutions interacting with Frankie today. We've got 3 of the big 4 banks. We've got great fast growth Australian export success stories like Afterpay. We've got a broad range of customers in the crypto space I mentioned. There's a lot of innovation going around in the buy now, pay later and lending space and in the payment space. So Frankie today, we're about 80 people. About 6 months ago, we were about 30 people. So that's fast growth too. We don't really do any marketing, which you'd probably notice, but we've won all of these customers from word of mouth and referrals. And we're finalists in the Pitch Fest on Thursday. So please tune in to see us there. So why do our customers choose Frankie? I would consistently describe it as choice, price, and convenience. We know that customers will never say to us, we want less options, we want to pay more for it and make it harder for us to get. And so we really anchor our innovation around providing the broadest range of data suppliers. We've gone to the effort of integrating over 350 data sources in 48 countries. That number keeps growing. So we're international, immediately. And so for us, for our customers, what that means is they improve their pass rate. So they are able to pass through more customers more easily, which is great for them. They can move into new countries and new jurisdictions really easily. And they can always see the full view of what their customers are doing across all those identity and fraud spaces. So today, half of our customers are international, which is about half of our revenue comes from international customers. And this is really because we've been pulled into other countries. When Afterpay expanded outside of Australia, we were pulled into the US and New Zealand. ZipMex are a cryptocurrency exchange in Asia, and they pulled us into Thailand, Indonesia, and Singapore. And so we're at a point as a business now where we're looking to push into other jurisdictions. And so we'll be establishing an office in the US in the coming weeks. And then maybe later this year will be an office in Singapore. But what we're really excited about is seeing exactly how we're making an impact in the world, and we're accelerating innovation in financial systems and markets. And we've talked a little bit today about financial inclusion, and it's worth obviously calling out my privilege. I'm a white woman, born in a middle-class family in suburban Brisbane, had a private school education. And so I certainly have never felt that disadvantage. We are part of the 1%ers. The rest of the world, particularly women of colour, particularly in third world countries, feel extreme disadvantage because the systems and structures exclude them. And so we are really excited that a number of customers that we're helping change that paradigm. So we've got a great organisation, Grameen Australia. They offer microloans to pull women out of poverty. We know how critical that is for women to establish themselves financially. Many of you may not know, but if you're a refugee who's moved to Australia, Commonwealth Bank will give you a bank account. And that's probably your first form of ID when you come into the country. But you'll need more than that to get on your feet. And so we're looking at organisations that offer financial assistance for education and housing. These businesses don't need to build their own identity and fraud services to offer customer innovation in this space. And so we're really excited that we can be a part of their journey and accelerate them and get them up and moving really quickly. And we have a true pay-as-you-go model, which I think provides huge access. You only pay for what you use. So I am sorry that my slides didn't share today. Well, if you want to jump on our website, you can have a look at a little bit more detail about our customers. We've got some case studies up there. But I would leave you with a question, and it's been alluded to earlier this morning that, the world is digital and clearly technology is here to stay. And yet in this space of regulation, there are still eye-watering fines for behaviour. And so while we're thinking about, all of that together, how do we move faster? We think technology can make a difference. And so the question that I would pose is, how do we accelerate financial equity in a world where there's never been a larger wealth gap? If you're interested in hearing more about Frankie, please reach out both as a customer. If you're in an organisation, or if you know an organisation that works in the financial inclusion space, please reach out. Thank you so much for your time, and really enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much, Tony. A fantastic presentation. And again, more food for thought from all our presenters this morning that we're going to pick up in our roundtable discussion, which is for members and invited guests, and we'll start in just a few minutes. So stay with us, and many thanks to all our presenters this morning.